Our main objective with these films is to teach people how to survive in the Aussie bush. And not only survive, but thrive. And to thrive, you need to take the fear out of it and hook up with all your mates. So that's what I've done. I've hooked up with my mate Gareth, who's also a really good bushman with a lot of experience. He knows a lot of the native plants, how to propagate them, how to collect them. He's a wealth of knowledge. And I've hooked up with him, and we've been running courses which have been really successful. Everyone's been going, wow, can we take your next course?
Hi, my name's Gareth, and I've been working with KOA on our Survive and Thrive bush survival weekends. And when KOA asked me if I'd be happy to turn this into a documentary, I thought this was a really exciting opportunity. People often ask me, how did you get into plants and working with the bush? But I don't really remember a time when I haven't been working with plants and in the bush. I've never grown up with a us and it sort of mentality at all. And to be able to share my enthusiasm and the knowledge I've gained over the years is really exciting.
Yeah, for the last 5,000 years we've had, all of us have had our roots pulled out of the earth. And all the tribes have been separated and broken apart. And look where it's got us. We're this close to killing all life on the surface of the earth. And we're all scattered and all over the place. So, from my perspective, we won't survive as a species. The human species will not survive unless we come back together as a tribe and walk this earth in harmony with it, in the spirit of love.
Well, I think KOA's right there on a multitude of levels. I think when we're out in the bush and we're just barely surviving, we need to remember that people have not only survived but lived out there in the bush for thousands of years, and they've done that without fear, thoroughly thriving and living in community. So what we're trying to do here is first up teach people how to survive and open them up to be able to live in harmony with their surroundings with that type of joy. That's the first step in coming back to tribe and community, being able to really flourish in our natural environment. So where we're going to start now is teaching you some of the basic plants you're going to find out there for your survival, and then we'll go through a bit of a journey into shelter, water, fire and many of the other aspects of the Australian bush.
Let's get going. The Aboriginals only used a few of the species, and then they can eat the beans inside the shell. And the mature seed they'd grind into damper, so they'd get it wet on a rock like a mortar and pestle and keep grinding it until it forms into a gluish mass, and then they could form it and throw it into the ashes and cook it as damper. You want to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean these are the black seeds that form, and yeah, very widespread across Australia, the use as a flour. It's really got a nutritious coat on it. Acacias have a really interesting relationship with the ants, that they have these little glands at the base of the leaf which releases a sugary substance, and it keeps the ants coming to the tree all year round until the seed matures. Then it cuts off the sugar production out of those glands and it produces a sugary coat on the seed pod. But they need to be scarified to germinate, like, you know, scratch back. So the ants scratching off the sugary substance makes the seeds germinate. They'll usually take them down into their nests and bang, off they go. So yeah, there's a lot of nutrition in the seed coat as well. It's a great flour. You know, organic wattle seed's now going for about $120 a kilo or something like that. That's how highly regarded it is. So it's not a bad bush tucker to be stuck with.
How do you get a coat off the seed?
You don't need to. You just crush it up between two rocks and you're away. Keep the seed coat, it's really nutritious. Yeah.
The sap is edible and it's delicious.
Really?
Yeah, the Aboriginals actually used to scar them in the autumn and come back in the spring and find a big glob of it and harvest it. It's a bit like farming, really. And it was incredibly nutritious. I'm always looking out for this sap when I'm going through the bush, because you can always just take that lump off and chuck it in your pocket or in your bag and eat it later.
That's
and
right.
you just suck on it and it just dissolves in your mouth. like a lolly.
Well, most of you would have heard of gum arabic or seen it on the ingredients in commercial chewing gums and things like that, and that's from an African acacia. So another fantastic feature, I think, of the wattles are the galls that form on it. These little round green apples. Now, most people think that that's a sign of an unhealthy wattle tree, whereas in fact it's a vital part of the ecosystem. I've told you about the ants and their relationship with the wattle. Well, the gall takes it a bit further because the wasp, which is inside of that, besides being a rich source of protein, is also the pollinator for the eucalypt trees. If you were to take away the wattles and their gall, you'd be losing all of the eucalypts from the ecosystem as well. And that really shows us how interrelated all of these, the plants and insects and everything are. There's no individuality. It's a total system, and it's really interreliant on each other.
This is a march fly. Aboriginals look forward to the march fly season. They used to eat them, you know, eat the whole thing. So one would land on them, smack it, whack right in the mouth, you know. And the reason is because each march fly has a ball of honey right in there at the base of its abdomen, and they're really sweet. I haven't got around to eating one whole. But what I do is I kill them straight away so they don't suffer. And then you just take their bum and pull out all the guts, chuck them. They don't look that appetizing to me. And then you pinch it. What did happen, man? There it is. See the honey? Now that is so sweet, man. I reckon there's heaps of nutrition in that. Tastes just like honey. Sweet hit. This is one of the most common plants this side of the Great Divide. It's farmer's friend. A lot of you know it because you see that seed pod sticking in all your clothing. But actually what you can do when you come across a big patch of this is you get a t-shirt out, some piece of clothing, and go along and collect all those. And then you put it in a river, get it all soaked up, and then hang it in a tree, and they're sprouting. So you can eat those sprouts. Every plant has a purpose. And one of the things I've been doing in Australia is taking plants that people don't like and showing them that they do have a purpose. And it doesn't do anybody any good to hate them. You know, so you might as well open up to them and let them reveal what it is that they came here to do. So you can eat the flower, which is what I do mostly. One of the biggest sicknesses in the whole developed country world is not getting trace minerals. We don't even let our babies crawl in the dirt and, you know, pick up trace minerals on their fingers. We are, you know, picking them up and whitewashing the whole society, which has caused us to have lots of sicknesses because without the trace minerals, you can't assimilate calcium. You can't assimilate all these other things. So it's crucial to know about plants like this in the bush. When you're walking through, I doubt if there's any place this side of the Great Divide where you're not going to come across that plant. And just eat the flower and keep moving. The young plants as well. See all the little young plants? Now if you wanted to, you know, you're going to pull up and have camp, cook up a pot of soup. Well, it makes a great soup. All the little young plants, you could get a pot of soup quite easily there.
The sprouts and saying that they're really tasty and they are particularly good for you. I know there's a famous Australian herbalist, Isabel Shippard, who rates them very highly on her list. But of course they get into your clothes, and the best way to get them out of your clothes rather than picking them off or scraping with a knife, sprout them in your clothes. And just soak your clothes, sprout them, and then you get them out of there and you get a snack at the same time.
This is Scots thistle, probably brought here from Europe, probably a couple hundred years ago. It's spread itself all through Australia, especially this side of the Great Divide. It's highly nutritious. It's another plant that actually the Native Americans use too as well. You can make fiber from the stem. They made fishing line and things like that from the stem. The leaves are highly nutritious. They've done lots of studies on it, and I'm not sure exactly what they came up with, but they reckon it's really highly nutritious. It's actually, you know the artichoke that you buy in the shop? You know the one that's a flower and you peel it off and eat it? Well, it's in the same family. That's the artichoke. And you can actually eat that like an artichoke. Very carefully. Ouch! Your buggy bit me. That's funny, because you know one of the things that I've developed over the years with plants is I actually talk to them, and they'll respond by moving their leaves. And I'm just bringing it up because you know just try it when you're in the bush or wherever you're at and you're around plants. Just have a little chat to them. You know, ask them how they are. Say something like, "Oh man, you're so beautiful," and see it? It just went. Yeah.
Spark.
So yeah, if you're in the bush survival situation, you pick the leaves very carefully. And what I've found with plants like this, instead of cooking them up, because you're going to lose a lot of nutrition, I carry a water bottle, and I'll just take a couple of leaves, chop them up, tear them up with my hands, chuck them in my water bottle, and then over a few hours, the water infuses the nutrients out of the leaf, and I just drink it like that. It's called sunshine tea. There's a lot of benefits to that sort of thing because you don't have to light a fire, which means you don't have to go get fuel to get your nutrition. You know, in the times to come, it might be that you don't want to build a fire. You don't want people to know where you are. Or you don't, all your matches are wet, or whatever, you know. Doesn't mean you're going to starve. You don't have to cook your food. In fact, it destroys nutrients to eat it, you know. There are foods that you have to cook because they've got alkaloids in them that are going to hurt you. But that's a different story. Plants like this you can eat raw. So sunshine tea is a really good way to go.
Okay, so here's something a little different. I spied him amongst all of the farmers' friends and yellow flowers. This has the appealing name of thickhead. And it has a really nutritious leaf, and it's an incredibly tasty leaf as well. I use it in salads and things all the time. It's very slightly nutty. And yeah, it's again incredibly good for you. It's just a young fella, but they can produce quite a decent sized leaf, and I'm sure we'll find a bigger one along the ways so you can have a try. But very distinctive flower. You can see there's no petals coming off the side of it. It's got that red centre. So that's thickhead. Did you want to add something? I know it's one of your faves, KOA.
Yeah. Well, they did tests on it to see if they could feed the refugee camps in Africa, because they reckon that all the B complex vitamins are in that plant and in the leaf. And they actually were going to move forward with it and make up a meal that they could spread throughout Africa. But Monsanto's came in with soybeans. Wow. So they dropped that project.
Okay, so what I'm going to look at doing here now is building a lean-to shelter. So what we need to do that is simply find a tree with a good fork in it, and this is perfect just here. We need some good sturdy branches to make the basic skeleton of the structure, and we've got plenty of those lying around. We've got the lantana we're going to have to move to make the shelter, and that's actually going to become part of the structure as well. And then we need twine to tie it all together. So I've collected some already. See here, we've got the native grape, which is a fantastic heavy-duty twine, which I'll use for tying up some of the bigger pieces of wood. And then for the finer stuff, got the native snake vine, which has a nice lightweight twiner, and that'll be perfect. The first thing we're going to do is clear the area. This is all pretty dead lantana, so I think it's just going to pull straight out. We can leave all of the leaf litter and stuff there because that's going to add to our insulation, so it's going to help keep us warm at night and our comfort as well. We just don't want these big woody bits. And again, now that I've found that there's cockspur vine right here, take the time just to have a close look and see that there aren't some other small pieces lying about like that, which you could get yourself caught up on in the middle of the night. I've found cockspur. There's small bits here all over the place, so in this instance I am going to scrape back what's here, and then I'm going to transport in some leaf litter. Everything you need is always within a few metres of you, you'll find. So we're going to start with the backbone of our shelter. Just need to make that sit up a bit higher in there, so what we can do, wedge in this rock. Now we need to start working on our skeleton around this. We've got some sticks here. Now, preferably, see if you can anchor them into the ground. So if you've got a digging stick while you're doing this, just something to, doesn't have to be a deep hole, just something to roughly keep it in place. Now this is where we get our fine twine, our snake vine. That on. Okay, so that's not going anywhere, and it doesn't have to be any better than that. It's a temporary emergency shelter. Keep adding pieces onto this on both sides, and you can see I'm using any of the old, where there have been branches coming off this log, I'm using those natural features of the timber to help reinforce the structure. That's why I'm leaning these into it. Now, once we've got a series of these running vertically on our verticals, we can start working in some horizontals as well. Lantana is fantastic for that. It's got that flexibility and it's lightweight. Simply start bringing them through in that sort of over, under. Okay, so we're coming along with our shelter here. As you can see, it's, you know, doesn't look like anything too flash. It's a really basic structure, but that's all you need. Something that's going to support the thatching that we're going to put on, and it's the thatching that we put on which is going to be the real shelter. Now, because I'm using it, I'm not putting it straight back into my pouch, but always remember where you put down your tools. A, so you don't lose it, and B, so you don't go and kneel down on a knife blade or something like that. So I'm going to keep that very handy. It's great that it's bright silver, it's a bit hard to miss. Okay, well it's starting to look a bit overcast, and I'm really happy with that as a basic structure, and I'm ready to start thatching it. I want to get myself in there before the weather turns. So, while I've been building this, my lovely assistant KOA has been off collecting this. This is Crofton weed. It's a really common wayside plant. This is perfect for what we want to do. So, keeping the roots on, you might just want to shake off a bit of the soil and stuff so it doesn't rain down on you. And keep it together as a clump because we want this to be really dense to keep the elements out. That's most of the way there. Now I could have done this using so many different types of foliage. I could have used ferns. Ferns are fantastic, and in fact I will collect up some ferns to line my floor. They're really comfortable. But when you're dealing with ferns, before you collect them for use, turn the fronds over and look to see if there are any little raised red or black bumps on the bottom of it. They're spores. That's the fern trying to reproduce, and they can be really irritant on the skin. So that's clean, we can use that. But if it did have all the spores on it, I'd probably not use it at that time of year. To know whether it's ready or not, come around to the other side, and this is really important. Get inside and see where the light's coming through. So from inside, we can still see there's lots and lots of light getting through. So I'd be working back and forth, going on the outside, adding thatching, coming back inside, looking for light coming through, and eventually no light will penetrate through that, and we'll have a lovely comfortable shelter. So that little fella there, he's standing there at the entrance to his little shelter, and he's pretty protective of it, as we would be of ours. Now, that's a great reason why if I was actually staying out here in the bush, I wouldn't have built the shelter right here. We've got this whopping great bull ant on the march, and I'm sure the rest of his family's lurking somewhere inside there. So that's one of those things you've really got to be aware of. When we started making the space, and I was using a stick and clearing the area and talking about some of the hazards, but really take a good look at, you know, if you're using a tree for a lean-to, have a look around the base of it, because lots of creatures like to use trees and the root systems in particular for their homes. It's really important to also look at what your surrounding foliage is, that you don't have big trees there that could potentially drop branches off you. Australian eucalypts are called widow makers for good reason. They do have a habit of dropping whopping big branches when the wind comes up, and you don't want to be underneath one when it comes down. With the bull ants, I may not have noticed that. See, here he still is here, very intrigued. He's just that little guard on duty, but bull ants really come out at night. They're a night hunter. So unless you do really pay close attention, you could easily miss that as a threat and find that they're all in your sleeping bag with you in the middle of the night. And, you know, that's just something you don't want to have happen.
I love it when I can build something that and use it and it goes back to the earth. It's a beautiful feeling. When I make a structure like that and sleep in it, what people have forgotten is that when you make something from your own hands, especially like you're going to sleep in it, your dreams become a lot clearer and a lot more meaningful than sleeping in anything else. Sleeping outside on the ground, great, watching the stars. But if you need shelter, yeah. I think these are things that people have forgotten about, how much joy there is in doing things for yourself from nature and watching it all go back, watching the cycles and being part of that is crucial. Yeah, so when I come into the bush, I'm always carrying a hammock and a mosquito net and one tarp. But if there's two of you hiking together and you each have a hoochie tarp, you can snap them together and build a shelter like this, which is big enough for two people. First thing I do when I find a spot where I want to build it is get off the ground. And so I build a platform up there, and then I put an A-frame over it and put my hoochie tarps over it. Now I've got a dry space. And then I can start working on the shelter, and even if it's raining, I can keep working on it. So the basic structure, like when I make my platform there, is made out of forked sticks. And there's heaps of forked sticks in the bush. I always look for ones that are already dead, not living trees. And just find that fork. With that A-frame there, that's what supports it. I have one there, Just like this. The beam is supported by 2 fork sticks. Alright? And in the shelter, I've used heaps of fork sticks. Every corner of the platform is a fork stick, so that can come through like that. And then I can run a stick over here to another fork stick and make like a square. And then I fill in the top. And that's the platform. And then over that platform I put an A-frame. So more fork sticks. Once I've got my platform up, and all the uprights are up, all the fork sticks, then I start triangulating it. You just take a stick and run it from one corner to the bottom. And then just make an X across there. And then that stiffens everything up. That structure is really, really strong. I can't even push it. You know? Very strong. I could get up on that platform and jump up and down. And then I start thatching it. So at the moment what I've got is banana leaves, because we've got a few groves of bananas up here, and never used them before, but they're working out really nicely. Normally a thatch is with the leaf, you take it by the base of the leaf and you bunch them all up and hang them like that. But because these fibers are running this way, it's going to work like this, horizontally on the shack. So what I do first is cut it right down the middle so that I have 2 different sets of fibers to work with. And because the banana is about 90% water, I get rid of some of that water just by shaving it. Whoops. That's pretty. Just shaving that off like that. And that just gets rid of the water. I don't need it anyway. And it'll just mold if you stick it up on your shack there. So what I've been doing is I get a few of these together, and then I'll tie them together on the ground and then lay them up on my shack there. It's really important to get off the ground when you're in the bush. That gets you up away off the ground, gets you away from snakes. Only two snakes in Australia that are toxic and dangerous climb, and they live out in the middle of the desert. They climb the moga trees and things like that. But here on this side of the Great Divide, none of our toxic snakes climb. And I'll tell you what, it's not fun to wake up with any kind of toxic snake under your bag or in your bag or curled up in your clothes. One time I was out in the bush when I first got to Australia, and there was no moonlight or starlight, and it was really, really dark, and I kept smelling this really intense reptile, but there wasn't much I could do. I just tried to stay super still because I knew this snake, whatever it was really close to me. I didn't want to roll over on it or something. So it was a pretty horrific night. I didn't get much sleep. And first light, as soon as I could see anything, I carefully got out of my bag. And as I did that, a death adder crawled out from underneath my pillow, my clothes that were wadded up as my pillow. It was sleeping under my head all night long, a death adder. So I made a point to go to the libraries and get all the books on snakes and read up on them and ask everyone that I met that grew up in Australia about snakes and stuff, and that's what I learned. Get off the ground. So that's why we get off the ground, build it up off the ground. Also, you get away from leeches, you get away from ticks, you get more of an airflow coming through your camp. That's really important if it's raining. If you're right on the ground, you're also a lot more apt to get water flowing down the surface of the ground and through your camp. And also, yeah, if you do have a watertight camp right on the ground, there's a lot more mold and things like that can occur. Yeah, you know, when you're looking for shelter, the first thing I do is actually look for a natural situation that'll that I can just enhance a little bit and make it a bit more tight. But look at this, man. That would totally keep you dry in the rain. That's so perfect. I want to get up on there. Check it out. Well, the first thing you got to do is check for bull ant nests and other kinds of critters, because you don't want to move in with them. Wake up in the middle of the night with bites all over you. So I don't see anything, but yeah, if I needed an emergency shelter, this would be so cool. I could actually lay down right here. It'd be a bit at an angle, but hey, wait out a storm and something like this. Perfect. And if I wanted to, I could actually block that off. Just go get some sticks and thatch that up. I could make this into a little house if I wanted to.
So what I want to talk about here is how you'd make a solar still so you can collect and purify water using simple foliage and a few simple items when you're out in the bush. Scrub turkey's come along and already started doing work for me in this lovely sunny spot here, so I'm going to take advantage of what it's done, save a bit of my energy, and I'm going to start making my hole. So the first thing to remember when you're making your hole is that you've got to be able to get a lot of light into it. So you're making it twice as wide as you are deep. So, kind of cheating using a tool here, but you could use a digging stick or something like that. And we'll use this soil that we're taking out, so we'll keep that close by. So you don't want to make it too deep. The light won't get into there, and it's not going to be as effective. So this would be perfect in a situation where you had a lot of foliage around you but the creeks were running dry. Maybe it's a bit droughtish. If you've got hot, dry conditions, it's absolutely perfect to make the still work. And these work really quickly. You'll find within a few minutes you'll already have condensation forming on the plastic. In this situation, you're always trying to conserve your energy. So there's no point making some enormous big hole and using a lot of energy, and you're not going to get the return for what you put in. So that'll do me. It's fine that there's roots there, it doesn't have to be all tidy. I'll take my bowl, coconut bowl. I'm going to sit that in the middle. Let's make sure it's going to be stable there. Don't want it to fall over and lose our water. So that just sits there. Then we just need some foliage. We just take that and we sit it around. I'm just stripping these leaves off, branch. I'm not taking off the whole branch. That'll all reshoot. No point destroying something or taking something out of the system when you don't need to. Okay. Then all we do, find a bit of plastic. It's really good to carry a polythene bag when you're out in the bush, but sadly you can probably find them in most places as well. So, I'm going to sit that over there, over the top, and then this is what we saved our soil for, that we dug out. Just going to use that to weigh down the plastic on the sides. Because we don't want the moisture escaping. There's our bowl in the centre, and I'm going to put the rock, and it probably needs to be a bit weightier than that. There we go. Sit that in the centre. So what we're going to find then is that the moisture on the leaves is going to evaporate, and it's going to come up and it's going to hit the plastic, and then it's going to run down to that point, that low point where the rock is above the bowl, and it's going to drip straight into the bowl, and we're going to end up with a bowl full of lovely clean drinking water. Okay, I think KOA's mentioned, you know, in terms of collecting water, first thing in the morning you've got dew. You can go through with a towel, your trusty old handkerchief, any bit of cloth that you've got, and soak up the dew, and then you can wring it into something.
Hopefully you haven't blown your nose in it.
That's right. That's recycling. Anyway. KOA and I are big believers in carrying a plastic garbage bag with you. It's just so invaluable. So what I can do here, the branch is already weighed down. I can collect some of these branches here into the bag. Then just seal it up. So obviously, as I was saying, it's best to do this in full sun. Now, this again is not going to hurt the tree. The tree is actually going to draw up water through its roots to keep supplying this branch. It's still a living part of the tree. So you're just working with the plant. So we're getting that pretty tight, so that the water's not going to escape out the top. You'd use the same principle with some rocks or a bit of cord or something to tie down your sapling, and you want to make sure there's a low point here for the water to collect. You might put a rock or something in the bottom of the bag to create a low point. I'll just pop that there. Now, even here with just some sunlight, if we come back in 10 minutes, this will be saturated with condensation. There'll be water droplets all over the bag. Then what will happen is it'll run down to the low point. And by the end of the day, you'll start to have, and you know, give it a bit of a shake to make sure it all runs down to the bottom before you open it up. You'll have a decent amount of water collected, enough for survival purposes in the bottom of the bag.
A lot of people ask me about mushrooms, you know, about the edible mushrooms and which ones they can eat and stuff, and for the most part I tell them to just leave them alone. Unless they can positively identify that mushroom, just leave it alone, because so many mushrooms can look so similar to each other, and if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, they can hurt you pretty bad and even kill you. But Mark and I just came across in the forest here a hairy Jew's ear. Now that's a really easily identifiable mushroom. It actually looks like an ear, and see, I can see where they got the name. But hairy Jews, well, I don't know, Jews cop a lot of stuff, but it's called a hairy Jew's ear, and it grows up on the trees and on rotten dead wood, but also on logs that fall down to the ground and rot too. They grow on there as well. And when you see them, like if it hasn't been raining, and they're really, really hard to detect. They just look like tiny pieces of bark, like this big mushroom that we have here. Will shrink to insignificance, just tiny like that when it's not raining. As soon as it rains, any moisture in the air, they puff up again. You collect those dried ones, and then you can, when you get them to your camp, you can soak them up in a bit of water and they swell up. So it's a really, really significant food source, especially, I mean, there's lots of trace minerals in these mushrooms. And over the last few years, they've been doing a lot of research and finding out that there's actually quite a bit of protein, calcium, and all the other things that the body needs. So it's a substantial bush tucker, and one to really keep a lookout for. So that's on rotten dead wood. They love acacias. That one there I think might be an old tobacco. They love dead tobacco as well. So just keep an eye out for them when you're in the bush. They're absolutely delicious as well. When you see these like this in a situation like this and you're going to harvest them, don't take them all, obviously. You could take about half, and that would leave enough spores there to keep reseeding the log. So when you see them up in the tree like that, or on the ground on a log, you and let's say it hasn't been raining and they're very, very small and dried up looking like little bits of bark. Well, you can collect them like that, and they're really lightweight, so you can just put them in your bag and it's not going to weigh you down any. And when you get to camp, you can actually put olive oil in them, on top of them, and some herbs, and cut them all up and soak them up with all these herbs and stuff. And then they'll swell up and take on all those flavors. So they're really quite a gourmet bush tucker. Whoa, look at this. Oh goodness, I know what I'm having for dinner. Whoa. But hey, you gotta watch out for these, because if they're not pure white on the inside, they can make you sick. So let's just have a look. Yep, this is pure white, so that's going to be perfect. I'll just slice them up and chuck them in on top of some rice, or you can even eat them raw. Just break them up and put them in a bit of salad with some other bush tucker. They're absolutely delicious, but just make sure they're white, you know, on the inside, pure white. And these mushrooms can get as big as your head. There's quite a few different species. Some of them are real small, like a marble, and yeah, they get quite big. So yeah, lucky find here. Woohoo! Well, this looks like a good spot here to build an emergency shelter and get a little fire going. All right, first thing we got to do is clean the area. When you're going for a bushwalk, you have to think about what season it is. If it's a dry season, then that means you're going to react a lot differently with the way you build your fire. The slightest, tiniest little spark can start a bushfire, and that's exactly what you don't want to happen. So first thing we're going to do is just clean this whole area of anything that can burn. Get a stick. I'm not keen to use my hands doing this kind of thing, because you never know when you're going to come across a centipede or something like that. So I just get a stick, clean the area. If it's a wet season, you don't have to go to this much problem, because all these leaves will be soaking wet. Now, if it's not really windy, then I'll just build a fire up on the surface of the ground. But if there's a lot of wind happening, and it's bouncing off the trees and coming from all directions, well, I'll dig a trench. I carry a tool like this, quite light. You can also use a stick, but this makes the job quite easy to do. Okay, so we make a cross ditch, because that way it'll catch the air from every direction. Doesn't have to be very deep. So right about in the middle of that first trench, we'll go out the side. Come around here, the other side, straight across from that ditch. Handy tool to cut those roots. Okay, I'm just going to build up the side here. That dry stuff out of there. That should do it. Well, I'll just put the fire right in the middle, and that should keep it safe from the wind. Okay, now we'll show you how to build the fire and all the different fuels that you're going to need to collect. When you're collecting firewood, you know, lots of little critters live in that wood. It's a habitat for quite a few things. And, you know, like the redback spider, I see him all the time in little bits of dead wood. You know, it's one of his favorite habitats. And there's the white-tailed spider you could come across, and centipedes and scorpions. They all live in the wood and underneath the wood and stuff like that. So when you're going to collect wood, just be careful. I usually focus my eyes on all the wood and make sure there's no cavities where things can hide in. I don't want to disturb the homes of these little creatures if I don't have to. Okay, so I'm collecting 3 different kinds of firewood here. This is my kindling. So that's the smallest bit of wood that you collect. And you need that to get the fire going first up. A lot of people make the mistake of getting a bunch of paper and putting big logs like that straight onto it, but you actually got to build up from little up to the big. This is handy. I'll just collect all of this here. Bring it back over to our fire pit. After you've collected it, you want to separate it in all the little piles, starting with the tinder. And just make it really handy next to where you're building your fire, because if you set your tinder on fire and don't have this all ready to go, then your tinder is going to burn up real fast while you're scrambling around trying to get these little bits of wood. That's the second stage of wood, that size. The third stage. Now, actually, I'm going to get a few more that are about this size to get it going first, and then we'll go to this size, and then this size, and then that size. Lantana is a good thing to get the fire going with. Burns real quick and easy. And you can collect lantana even when it's raining and get it going, especially if it's suspended off the ground. Oh, see, and there's another reason why you got to be careful. I just jabbed myself. That's a piece of cockspur. When you're picking up wood, you should always look for thorns. Now, if one of those thorns went in me and broke off, it would hurt, and it can stay in there for a long time. This is our tinder. So we start with really dry leaves, because they'll catch fire really quickly. Now, the soil's quite damp. If it was at the end of the dry season, I wouldn't be digging down into the earth to build my fire, because these roots could actually catch fire and burn underground, and then come up somewhere down the track and start a bushfire. So you wouldn't do this if it was really dry, but we're just at the end of the wet season. We had a rain a few days ago, and the ground is still really damp. So I carry a fire kit. In this little wool bag, I've got waterproof matches. So that's one way I can light my fire. If the sun's shining, I've got a magnifying glass. I'll just bring it out. Everybody knows. Heaps of people used to start fires when they were kids with these. Well, it's a really handy thing to have in your fire kit. Unfortunately, there's not enough sun here at the moment. And then inside this plastic bag, I keep it in a plastic bag, and even double up a plastic bag so that it won't get wet. And so when I pull it out, I've always got dry stuff. Alright, I've got a candle. So if it was raining, I can use this candle to drip wax onto the tinder, and that'll start it even if the wood's wet. I carry strips of ghost gum bark, which has quite a few oils in it, and it starts really quickly, and yeah, it just starts really quickly. So we'll get a few pieces of this out. I probably don't even need it, but I'm just showing you, like, especially if it was damp around, well, I'd want to have really dry kindling. This is my tinder, and it's the down from the thistle and the milkweed. Quite a few different plants have this fluffy, downy kind of stuff, and it's all incredibly flammable. Most of this came from the Scots thistle, which grows around all over the paddocks and along the creeks, along the edge of the rainforest. So whenever I see it in blossom and it's doing this, these are all seeds. I collect it and put it in my fire kit, because that starts up really quick. So I'll put a little bit of that down here. And then I carry a magnesium flint and steel tool, which you can get at any camping shop, army disposal, whatever. This block is magnesium. And with this tool I can scrape magnesium off of here. If it's raining, it burns really, really hot, and it'll start wood even when it's wet. Okay, but it's not wet right now, so all we need is a spark. I want to have a little teepee here. The fire eats air. That's what it eats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks and everything. It's always air. So you got to just make sure you've got enough air to your fire. So and now we got the flame going. Okay, as you add the tinder to it, make sure you're leaving plenty of gaps in there for air. See how I'm putting them across like that? Now we can start adding the bigger sticks. Then the next size fuel. We'll let that burn for a little bit. Okay, we're going to put the fire out now. And like I said, I don't have any water to put on it, so just stir those coals around like that. And then take all this loose dirt and put it on there and smother it. Alright, here's a sandpaper fig. That's a really important plant to know about. Alright, it's just one little fig right there on the plant. You see it? They turn blue, and when it's in full fruiting, it'll be full of fruit. I can see quite a few now, actually. Quite a few all over the tree. All the figs in Australia are edible. All the figs all around the world are edible, actually. Just the fruit, not the leaves and the bark and all those kind of things. Just the fruit. But and a fig is pretty easily to identify, because when you pick the fruit from the tree and break it open, it's got millions of little seeds in there. Almost everyone knows what a fig looks like on the inside. And this is a sandpaper fig, so the Aboriginals actually used these leaves to polish things, just to put the fine sanding on a boomerang or whatever they were doing. And one of the most important things to know about the sandpaper fig is that, like when you're walking through the bush, many times I'll come across a grove, like you might find 20 of them. A bird has eaten the figs, shit them out, and 20 of them have sprouted in the same place. And when that situation happens and I'm going through the bush, and I know that at the end of the day I'm going to have to put a shelter together, well, this is one of the best fibers there is. So I can go into that little cluster of sandpaper figs and take one of them out, maybe 2 or 3 of them if there's 20 there, and peel the bark. It comes off real easy. Just peel it right off in long strips, and I can use that to tie my shelter together with. And the sandpaper fig is everywhere in the bush, from Sydney to Cooktown, this side of the Great Divide. It's one of the most common plants in the bush. The other thing about the sandpaper fig, like if you come to one tree and you're trying some fruit and it doesn't really taste that much and it's not that nice, well, don't give up on it, because 3 meters down the track, the next fig might be sweet. You can never tell. And one, just meters away, one will be really sweet and one will be tasting like cardboard. Either way, if you're in a survival situation, you're going to eat it and get that nutrition and trace minerals and all those things that you're going to need to survive.
It's really important to know at the end of this valley, the next property, last property along, until about when I was born in 1973, was the biggest timber mill in the Northern Rivers region. And in 1973, this beautiful ridge along here was bare. There was nothing on it. It was totally logged out. So at that point, it all started with all these little farmers' friends and crofton weeds and things coming up. Then came in the lantana and the camphor, and that provided shelter so that things like the cedars and things could come through. And now, 35 years later, we've got this beautiful rainforest because people have just let that natural course of events happen. So they're not bad things, they're not really weeds, they're actually nature's first step in healing itself and taking it back to, you know, a healthy environment. So I just think that's a really important thing to take account of when we're looking at these plants.
Well, we just came across a stinging tree, and boy, that's one that is really good to know. It's one of the first trees that comes up, like in the rainforest where a big rainforest tree has fallen over, and this tree will be one of the first pioneers that come up through that for the light. And it'll come up especially along when people make tracks into the rainforest or around the rainforest. It'll come up in lots of different places. And if you don't know what it looks like and you accidentally run into it, well, you're going to wish you had your mommy with you, because it is very, very painful. And it's one of those things, it's got hollow crystals all over it. Every part of that plant has got these hollow crystals with really, really sharp points. And if you touch it anywhere on that plant, those crystals go into you and down into the nerves and then break off. And they're hollow. And so even 6 months later, when you go to wash your hands with cold water or something, the pain will come back. So it's a really good plant to avoid. Some people have actually died from shock with this plant. You know, like I've heard of a logger who was sawing down a tree and accidentally fell off, and he didn't have his shirt on, and he fell into the tree. Well, he died before they could get him out of shock. This is a giant stinging tree. We have 2 species of stinging tree in Australia. And this is a giant stinging tree, which we have in the border ranges down here in this part of New South Wales. And it's dangerous from the word go. As soon as it comes up out of the ground, it's already got these hairs on them. Okay, this is one of the most important bushtucker plants this side of the Great Divide. You'll find it a lot along creeks, along riverbanks, and actually most of your bushtucker this side of the Great Divide happens either along the edges of creeks, rivers, or in the creek or river. So this is a very, very common one. You'll find it from Cooktown to Sydney, all along the Great Divide. When you dry it, you've got to be really careful of picking this plant because it's got all these crystals in it which will sting you and make you really uncomfortable. So you got to pick it, like a piece of paper like that will work, and I'll just go in there and pick it. If I pick a bunch of them and hang them in my camp and dry them, they go neutral. So then I can make a tea out of it or whatever, and it's not going to hurt me. But what we've done today for one of our meals that we're going to have is we steamed it, and Gareth made it into a pesto with macadamia nuts and stuff. It's really quite a beautiful food. It has a really, really nice taste, this one. And they've done lots of studies on it. It's really high in iron, which is crucial to your health. And you know, it's not just on the banks of the rivers and stuff. It'll be along like up here, away from the creek and river. It loves to grow in mulch around fruit trees and stuff. So lock that in, because yeah, you don't want to fall into that, or like say there's avocados in a tree. I don't see any there now, and you didn't know this plant and you just walked right into it. It's a hot day and you got your clothes off. You're going to be very, very uncomfortable. One thing I wanted to do in this film is, because a lot of people that are going to watch this film have seen our first 2 films, and in our first film I actually made some mistakes. I did the classic. I read something and then thought, oh yeah, this is true, and repeated it, and then found out later that it wasn't true. So I just want to correct that right now. And it's basically about whenever I say that all the species in one family are edible, disregard it, because for one thing, they haven't done the studies, like say on ferns. They haven't tested all the ferns, so they don't know, and I can't be saying that. So in our first film, yeah, just be sure that you, if you see that, or if you've already seen it, to realize that those aren't true statements. We just don't know for sure, and I don't want to say something that I don't know for sure about. When you're in the bush and you see a plant that you think you know, but you're not sure, don't eat it to start with. And put it to the edibility test if you really want to know. Don't take any chances, because there are plants out there that can hurt you. Even if you just put them to your lips, they can burn the skin right off to your lips. So just be really, really careful and really, really sure about what you're doing when you're going. And also, people have different bodies, you know, like and allergic reactions. So even any of these foods that you see in these documentaries, just try a little bit at a time. See how your body reacts to it, and then take it from there, because you might have an allergic reaction to one of these plants. So yeah, just be really careful.
I totally agree with that about the mistakes that are in books that have come out about bush tucker, or just about any other subject that you might care to name. There's no one surefire Bible on bush tucker. It's really good, if you want to read up about it and find out more about it, to look at a few sources of information, and you'll find that there are discrepancies there. But one of the most valuable resources you've got is your elders. Speak to people who have been out in the bush for years, who have worked with these plants, that know. You know, the internet's great, the books are great, but you don't know the research that has gone into them totally. Your elders, people that have worked in the bush, you do. You can have a lot more faith because they've been there doing it for a lot of years. That's why it's been fantastic working with KOA, and I think we've both had a fantastic learning curve going through this process with all the plants.
Yeah, that's right. One of the main points that we're weaving through this whole documentary is to walk softly. To walk softly in the bush. Take a little bit here, a little bit there. Not go to one plant and take it all. You know, and also weaving through the whole documentary is there are no weeds. You know, every plant has a purpose.
Coming to the end of this first documentary that KOA and I have done together, it's really exciting that so many people are interested in what we're doing. And some people have come forward and said, oh, we're not sure about this, or we're not sure about that, and it's been fantastic, the whole learning curve, and we're really enjoying taking it to another level, which is what we really hope to do in future documentaries. Coming to the end of the documentary really is just the beginning.
See you on the next one.
See you soon.